The war began without warning. One moment, the sky over the human colony world of Arden Prime was clear. The next, it was filled with the burning trails of alien drop pods cutting through the clouds. People ran for shelter, alarms screamed, and the air tasted of smoke and fear. The invaders were called the Clearan Dominion, a proud warrior race feared across the galaxy. They were tall, fast, and armed with weapons forged for killing. But this attack was different. It was led by their most feared champion, a woman with glowing golden eyes and blue skin that seemed to shine even under the shadow of war. Her name was scifi. Stories about her were told like warnings to children. She had never lost a battle, never been wounded, and never spared a foe she challenged. She carried a blade made of burning light and wore armor that seemed alive with shifting patterns. Her reputation was so great that even other warriors of her race would not dare face her in a duel. To her, the war was not about conquest. It was about proving herself again and again in the only way she found joy, in battle, when she landed. On Arden Prime, she broadcast her challenge across the battlefield. Her voice carried not just in sound but in the minds of all who heard it. "If a human ever beats me," she declared, her tone dripping with mockery, "I will marry him." To her, it was a joke, a way to taunt the humans she saw as slow and weak. She laughed at the thought. None of them could ever match her speed, her strength, or her skill with the blade. In the chaos, one human soldier heard her words more clearly than the rest. His name was Daniel Rourke, a captain in the Colonial Defense Forces. He was not the strongest man on the battlefield. He was not the fastest either. But he had something Serica had never fought against before, a human's refusal to quit, no matter the odds. When he saw her cutting through his soldiers, he did not think about her beauty or her terrifying presence. He thought only of stopping her, because if he didn't, everyone he knew would die. Daniel was pinned down behind a crumbling wall when she appeared on the street ahead. Her glowing eyes locked on him, and her smile widened as if she had found prey worth playing with. She spun her blade in one hand, the weapon humming with deadly energy. "Come on, human," she called out. "Show me what your kind can do." Around them, the sounds of battle faded as soldiers from both sides stopped to watch. A duel with scifi was a rare sight, and a short one. Daniel stepped out from cover, gripping his rifle. But he didn't raise it. He knew she could deflect energy bolts before they even left the barrel. He let the rifle fall to the ground and drew the short combat blade at his belt. She tilted her head, amused. "You choose to die with honor? Interesting." She advanced, every step slow and confident, her eyes never leaving his. He could feel the heat from her blade, could hear the faint hum of its energy. The crowd watching expected it to end in seconds. The first clash came fast. Her blade moved like lightning, striking for his chest. Daniel blocked, his arm shuddering. Under the force, sparks flew where their weapons met. She pressed harder, testing his strength, her smile never fading. He ducked under a sweeping slash, stepped in close, and slammed his shoulder into her. The impact made her take one step back. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in interest. She had not expected him to still be standing. Daniel kept moving, never giving her time to control the fight. He struck low, then high, forcing her to shift her stance. The air between them was a blur of steel and light. The crowd watching began to murmur. She was still in control, but this human was lasting longer than anyone she had faced in years. And somewhere deep inside, Serica felt something she had almost forgotten. The thrill of a real challenge, asterisk. The duel drew more soldiers from both sides, turning the ruined street into an arena. Neither side dared to interfere, because interrupting a challenge like this was dishonor among the Clearan and cowardice among humans. The air shimmered with heat from burning buildings, and smoke coiled into the sky. Serica moved with the grace of a predator, her glowing eyes fixed on Daniel. testing him with quick, sharp strikes that made the crowd flinch. But Daniel stayed in the fight, his boots grinding against broken stone as he shifted to meet each blow. Serica was enjoying herself. Most humans she fought went down in seconds, begging for mercy or lying dead before they could even comprehend her speed. Daniel was different. His eyes didn't follow her blade alone. They watched her feet, her shoulders, her breathing. He anticipated her attacks in ways she found irritatingly effective. It wasn't enough to defeat her, but it was enough to keep him alive. And that, to Serica, was both amusing and dangerous. "You are better than I thought," she said, circling him. Her voice was like a challenge and a compliment at the same time. Daniel didn't answer. Talking would only give her more time to find a weakness. He lunged instead, the tip of his blade grazing the armor on her side. It was not a wound, but it was enough to make her smile fade slightly. She stepped back, reassessing the fight with a new glint in her eyes. Around them, human soldiers whispered Daniel's name in disbelief. Some of them had fought beside him for years, yet they had never seen him move like this. The Clearan warriors watching were silent, their expressions unreadable. They were loyal to Serica, but even they had to admit the human was showing skill. The tension thickened with every passing second, the crowd leaning closer to see if this rare contest would end in a way no one expected. Daniel's muscles burned, but he didn't let it slow him down. He remembered her promise, the taunt she had broadcast before landing. "If a human ever beats me, I'll marry him." It was meant as an insult, but Daniel was stubborn enough to take it as a challenge. He didn't care about marriage to an alien, but he understood the symbol. If he could beat her, even for a heartbeat, it would mean a human could stand equal to the galaxy's most feared warrior. Serica shifted her stance, her movements becoming sharper, more aggressive. She was done testing him. Now she was aiming to end the fight. Daniel blocked a slash aimed at his throat, the impact rattling his arm. He ducked a spinning strike that cut through the air where his head had been a moment earlier. He countered with a low kick, sweeping her leg enough to make her stumble back. The crowd gasped at the sight of their champion losing balance. Even for an instant, her blade rose again, burning with brighter energy. Daniel knew he had only moments before she unleashed something he couldn't stop. His mind raced, looking for any mistake in her pattern. Then he saw it, the slightest pause in her swing, just after a left-hand feint. It was a gap so small no normal fighter could exploit it. But Daniel wasn't fighting to win a tournament. He was fighting for survival, and that made him sharper than he had ever been. He baited her into the move, stepping left as if leaving his side exposed. She took the bait, her blade cutting in with blinding speed. But Daniel's blade met hers. In the gap, twisting with all his strength. The force of it sent her weapon offline, and for the first time in years, Serica's guard was open. Daniel's blade came to rest against her neck, close enough for her to feel its cold edge through the armor. The crowd froze. No one breathed. Serica's golden eyes locked with Daniel's, and in them he saw not anger, but something far more dangerous, curiosity. Slowly she stepped back, lowering her blade. "You touched me," she said softly, as if speaking to herself. Then she tilted her head, the faintest smile returning. "Very well, human. You have my attention now." The soldiers watching knew this fight was far from over, but something had already shifted between them. The air between them felt different now. Daniel had done what no human was supposed to do, press the Clearan champion into a moment of vulnerability. Serica didn't step away to recover her pride. Instead, she stood there studying him, as if trying to understand what kind of human could match her speed. Around them, the crowd of soldiers remained frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. Even the sounds of distant fighting seemed muted compared to the tension in the street. Daniel didn't lower his blade immediately. He knew this wasn't over. Her stance was too relaxed, too controlled, as if she had decided the duel had just begun. His arms ached from the weight of the fight, but he kept his breathing steady. Across from him, Serica slowly tilted her head. Her golden eyes locked on him. It was no longer the look of a predator taunting prey. It was the look of a warrior evaluating another warrior. "You fight without fear," she said at last. The words were not mocking. They carried a weight that made Daniel's heartbeat quicken. He didn't reply. Instead, he adjusted his grip, his knuckles white on the hilt of his blade. If she was trying to provoke him into speaking, she would fail. He wasn't here for words. He was here to finish what had begun. Serica moved first, this time faster than before. Her strikes came in. A flurry, her blade flashing in arcs of red light. Daniel met each one, his boots scraping against the cracked pavement as he gave ground slowly. He couldn't match her strength, but he could redirect it, letting her momentum carry past him. Sparks rained where their weapons clashed, the sound of steel and energy echoing off the ruined buildings around them. The fight drew them across the street, stepping over rubble and bodies. A burning transport smoldered nearby, its hull glowing from heat. Serica shifted to use the smoke as cover, her figure blurring in and out of sight. Daniel's instinct screamed at him to move, and he dropped low just as her blade carved through the space where his head had been. He rolled forward, coming up inside her guard, his blade slashing at her armor. The impact rang out, leaving a faint mark but no true damage. Her smile returned, sharper than before. "Good," she said, almost. Breathless, Daniel could feel her focus intensifying. It was as if every move he made only encouraged her to push harder. This was no longer about a quick victory for her. It was about testing the limits of both of them. She swung high, forcing him to block, then spun low, trying to sweep his legs. He jumped back, landing in a crouch, ready to spring again. The soldiers on both sides murmured among themselves. Humans whispered that Daniel might actually win. Clearan warriors exchanged glances, some frowning, others watching with grudging respect. No one stepped forward to interrupt. This was no longer a simple duel. It had become something larger. Something both armies understood instinctively. A moment that would be remembered long after the battle ended. Serica lunged again, her blade a blur. Daniel caught it with his own, twisting hard enough to throw her off balance. This time he didn't step back. He pressed forward, striking 3 times in rapid succession. She blocked the first 2, but the third grazed her shoulder, sending a small spark from her armor. The crowd gasped. Serica froze for a heartbeat, then let out a short laugh. "You dare mark me," she said, almost sounding impressed. Daniel didn't let the pause distract him. He moved again, forcing her to defend. Their blades clashed in. A flurry, the sound filling the air like a drumbeat. She was still faster, but he was forcing her to adapt. That was his goal, to make her fight his fight instead of hers. The heat from their weapons burned the air between them, sweat running down his face as he kept his eyes locked on hers. The clash ended with both of them standing apart again, breathing hard. Smoke curled around them, and the street was littered with glowing sparks from their weapons. Serica rested her blade on her shoulder, her eyes narrowing. "You are not like the others," she said. "You hear my words, and you believe them." Daniel's grip tightened. He remembered exactly what she had promised before the battle began, and his voice came out steady. "I do," he said. "And I intend to collect." Asterisk. The words hung in the air, cutting through the smoke and the murmurs of the crowd. Serica's eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time her smile faded into something unreadable. Daniel's tone was not a boast or a taunt. It was a statement of intent. Around them, the soldiers from both sides seemed to sense that the duel had shifted into something more personal. The fight was no longer just about pride or skill. It had become a promise. Serica stepped forward slowly, her blade still resting on her shoulder. "You think victory is within your reach," she said, her voice carrying across the silent street. Daniel didn't flinch. His breathing was heavy but steady, his stance firm. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying a puzzle she had yet to solve. Her movements became more deliberate, her golden eyes locked on him with renewed focus. When she struck again, it was with a different rhythm. Her attacks were faster but less predictable, weaving high and low, forcing Daniel to adjust with each move. He deflected one strike only to find another already coming from a new angle. The sound of their blades filled the air, sharp and constant. Daniel knew she was testing him in a new way, looking for the limits of his endurance and his mind. He countered when he could, each move measured to force her to react instead of lead. A quick slash toward her leg made her shift her stance, buying him a second to reset. A feint toward her shoulder drew her guard high, letting him push in close. Their blades locked, their faces only inches apart. He could see the faint sheen of sweat on her skin, and the way her breathing had quickened ever so slightly. Her strength in the lock was overwhelming. Daniel braced his boots against the stone and pushed back with all he had. For a moment, neither moved. Then she broke the lock suddenly, spinning away and striking again from the side. He blocked in time, but the force drove him a step backward. She pressed the attack, each strike landing harder than the last. The crowd leaned forward, caught in the rhythm of their clash. A sudden explosion shook the ground nearby as a building collapsed from earlier damage. Dust rolled across the street, momentarily blinding them both. Daniel used the cover to change his position, circling to her left. She adjusted immediately, her blade slicing through the dust toward his voice. He ducked low and drove forward, his shoulder slamming into her armored side. The impact staggered her, but she recovered quickly, turning the momentum into a sweeping strike that forced him to leap back. They came together again, blades ringing in the smoky air. Sirica's expression had changed. There was no longer the smug certainty she had shown at the start. Now there was focus, calculation, and something else, the faint spark of enjoyment that came only from a challenge worthy of her skill. She lunged with a sudden burst of speed, her blade aimed for his heart. Daniel twisted at the last moment, the edge of her weapon grazing his armor and leaving a glowing scar across it. He answered with a slash of his own, the tip of his blade striking her gauntlet. The hit knocked her weapon slightly offline, and, for a heartbeat, her guard was open again. Daniel stepped in, his blade rising toward her chest. She caught it at the last instant, the clash ringing out so loud it silenced the murmurs of the crowd. They stood locked together, each pushing with every muscle they had. The pressure between their blades was almost unbearable. Sparks sprayed from the contact, dancing in the dim light. Daniel's jaw clenched as he pushed, his muscles straining. Sirica's eyes held his, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sharp twist, she broke the lock and stepped back. Her breathing was heavy, now her chest rising and falling beneath her armor. She lowered her blade slightly, but her eyes never left him. "You still stand," she said quietly. There was no mockery in her tone now. Few can claim that. Daniel didn't respond with words. He simply straightened his stance and raised his blade again, his determination clear in every movement. Sirica's lips curved into a small, dangerous smile. "Then let us see how much longer you can," she said. The crowd knew the duel was far from over, and the next exchange would decide far more than victory. The street felt smaller now, the air thicker, as if the weight of their duel pressed down on everyone watching. Neither Sirica nor Daniel moved for several seconds, their eyes locked, reading the intent in each other's stance. The crowd remained silent, waiting for one of them to break the stillness. Smoke curled from the edges of shattered walls, and somewhere distant a gunship roared overhead. But here, in this ruined place, The only battle that mattered was the one between them. Serica shifted first, lowering her stance and bringing her blade to the side. The movement was smooth, but Daniel noticed the faint tightness in her shoulders. She was conserving energy now, adjusting her approach. When she stepped forward, her strikes were slower but heavier, each blow designed to force him back by sheer weight. Daniel absorbed them, bracing himself with each impact, letting the force run through his body instead of against it. He waited for an opening. Her style had changed enough that he knew there would be a moment where her guard dropped. It came when she struck downward with full force, her weapon embedding slightly into the cracked pavement. Daniel pivoted to the side, his blade flashing toward her unprotected arm. She twisted at the last moment, the edge grazing her armor but not breaking through. Still, the contact was enough to make her step back. Her eyes narrowed as she glanced. At the faint mark, "You're learning," she said. Daniel didn't reply, keeping his focus sharp. He had begun to understand her rhythm, how she favored certain combinations, and how her stance shifted before each strike. The problem was that she was learning him too, and her adaptability was far greater than he expected. One mistake would be the end, and both of them knew it. The crowd sensed the rising tension. Even the Clearan warriors, loyal to their champion, were now leaning forward with interest instead of certainty. The humans watching held their breath, willing Daniel to keep standing. The clash of steel and energy filled the air again as Serica attacked, this time with renewed speed. Daniel barely kept pace, their blades locking and sliding with each rapid exchange. A sudden step forward brought him within her reach, and her knee struck his side hard enough to send pain shooting through him. He staggered but didn't fall, spinning to deflect the follow-up slash aimed at his head. His counter came in the form of a low sweep of his blade, forcing her to jump back. The moment she landed, he charged, driving her toward the wall of a ruined building. Serica's back nearly touched the wall when she twisted to the side, letting him pass. She spun with her movement, her blade slicing toward his back. Daniel dropped into a roll, the edge of her weapon slicing the air above him. He came up on one knee, swinging upward. She caught the strike just in time, the impact ringing loud enough to echo off the surrounding ruins. They broke apart again, breathing heavily. Sweat ran down Daniel's face, and Serica's chest rose and fell quickly beneath her armor. Neither showed any sign of surrender. Daniel's eyes held the same unshakable focus he had from the beginning. Serica's expression was no longer mocking or amused. It was respect, sharp, dangerous, and rare for someone of her standing. "You fight as if nothing else exists," she said. "That is dangerous for your enemies." Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, his blade never lowering. "You haven't beaten me yet," he replied. A slow smile curved her lips. "Then perhaps I will stop holding back," she said, her voice low but carrying across the street. The crowd shifted, sensing what was about to happen. Her next movement was like a flash of light. She launched forward with a speed Daniel had not yet seen from her, every strike flowing into the next without pause. The force of it drove him back step by step, his arms straining to keep up. The sound of their weapons was a blur, the sparks between them falling like a constant storm. Daniel's boots slid against the stone as he fought to hold his ground. Daniel felt the pressure in every bone as Serica's relentless assault drove him back. Each strike came faster than his eyes could fully follow, yet his body moved on instinct, blocking, deflecting, and stepping just enough to avoid a fatal blow. Street beneath his boots felt slick from the dust and debris, but he refused to let his footing slip. Around them, the crowd watched in tense silence, knowing the fight had reached its most dangerous stage. Serica's eyes burned with golden fire as she pressed the attack. There was no longer any restraint in her movements. Every strike was meant to break him, to crush his defense, and end the duel in one decisive moment. Her blade hummed with power, the air itself seeming to tremble each time it passed close to his skin. Daniel's arms ached from the force, but he kept his focus sharp, watching for the one mistake she might make. The moment came in a fraction of a second. She overextended on a downward strike, the tip of her blade cutting into the stone and slowing her just slightly. Daniel pivoted to the side, driving his shoulder into hers with all his strength. The impact staggered her, sending her a step back. He swung high, forcing her to block, then low, making her shift her balance again. For the first time, he saw her breathing faster than his. Her counter came quickly. She spun with a graceful precision, her blade sweeping in a wide arc. Daniel barely ducked under it, feeling the heat from the weapon pass over his head. He came up fast, his blade striking toward her midsection. She blocked, their weapons locking once again in a test of strength. Their eyes met across the clash, and neither looked away. The crowd could feel the intensity like a pulse in the air. Serica pushed hard, breaking the lock and striking again. Daniel met each blow, his boots sliding back an inch at a time. He refused to yield more ground than necessary. She lunged, her blade a streak of light aimed for his shoulder. He twisted away, the weapon grazing his armor and leaving a glowing scar. Pain flared along his side, but he ignored it, forcing himself forward again. The sounds of the larger battle around them had faded into a distant hum. Here, it was only the ring of their weapons and the sharp rhythm of their breathing. Serica feinted left, then came right, her blade moving in a blur. Daniel met her every time, but the strain was building. His arms felt heavy, his breaths coming shorter. He knew she could sense it too, and that made her even more dangerous. But Daniel was not done. He shifted his stance, lowering himself slightly and focusing on precision instead of power. Each block was tighter, each strike sharper. He no longer tried to match her force for force. Instead, he made her chase him, turning her speed into a disadvantage. She swung wide, and he stepped just beyond reach. She lunged, and he sidestepped, striking at her exposed flank. It wasn't enough to wound her, but it kept her on edge. Her frustration began to show in the smallest ways. A tighter grip on her weapon, a fractionally faster pace between attacks. Daniel caught these details and used them. When she stepped in with a heavy strike aimed low, he blocked and twisted, pulling her weapon offline. He drove forward, forcing her back 2 steps. The crowd erupted in murmurs at the sight of the champion yielding ground. Serica's lips curved into a sharp smile. "You adapt well," she said. "But you cannot keep this up forever." Daniel didn't answer. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes were steady. She tilted her head, then came at him again, her strikes faster than before. He met them with everything he had, the clash of their weapons filling the air like thunder. The final strike of the exchange left them both standing still, blades lowered slightly, eyes locked, neither moved for several seconds. The air between them was heavy, charged with the knowledge that the duel was far from over. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. Serica's smile deepened, her golden eyes glinting. "Then let us finish this," she said. The soldiers on both sides leaned in, knowing the next moments could decide the fate of more than just the 2 warriors before them. The dust around them settled as the street became an arena once more. Daniel stood ready, his blade steady despite the ache in his muscles. Serica's stance was low and poised, every part of her body tuned for speed and power. The crowd watching knew they were moments away from the final push. No one spoke, no one moved. All attention was locked on the 2 warriors preparing to clash again. Serica was the first to move. She came in fast, her blade slicing through the air with a hum that seemed to vibrate in Daniel's bones. He blocked, stepped aside, and countered with a quick strike aimed for her shoulder. She deflected it effortlessly and spun, her weapon flashing toward his legs. He jumped back, landing with both feet firm and ready for the next attack. Daniel's breathing was heavy but controlled. He knew that if he allowed her to dictate the pace for too long, he would lose. He forced himself forward, striking twice in rapid succession. The first blow she parried with ease, but the second came close enough to graze her armor. It wasn't damage, but it was a reminder that he could still reach her if she gave him the smallest opening. Her golden eyes sharpened as she shifted her style. Now her movements became unpredictable, a series of short feints and sudden bursts of speed. Daniel kept his focus locked, watching her shoulders, her hips, the subtle shifts that revealed her true direction. When she lunged in, he sidestepped and brought his blade across in a sharp arc. She caught it, the impact ringing out and forcing both to reset their positions. The tension grew with every exchange. Each strike now carried more weight, more risk. One misstep would mean the end. Serica came low, sweeping toward his side, and Daniel dropped his blade to block. The force rattled his arms, but he twisted, turning the block into a push that sent her stumbling half a step. It was barely visible to the crowd, but he saw it. A crack in her control. He moved to exploit it, stepping in with 3 rapid strikes. The first forced her back, the second made her lift her guard high, and the third came low toward her ribs. She twisted away in time, but he had closed the distance again. Their blades locked, and they stood inches apart, breathing hard. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes glinted with a spark of something more than respect. "You have earned this fight," she said softly. The words were almost drowned out by the pounding in Daniel's ears. He gave no answer, only pressing forward as their blades strained against each other. She broke the lock with a sudden shove and leapt back, her boots skidding across the stone. Daniel charged, refusing to give her space to reset. Their weapons clashed again, faster than the eye could follow. Sparks flew in showers with every impact, the sound sharp and constant. Daniel blocked a downward slash and struck high, forcing her to parry awkwardly. She retaliated with a spin, her blade slicing toward his side. He twisted away, feeling the air stir against his armor. They circled each other again, both breathing heavily, both refusing to yield. The onlookers could feel the change in the air. The fight was nearing its breaking point. Even the Clearan soldiers, loyal to Serica above all, were now silent with anticipation. The humans dared not speak for fear of distracting Daniel. The only sound was the sharp rhythm of their duel, steel against energy, will against will. Serica struck again, her blade moving in a complex pattern meant to overwhelm. Daniel met her with equal determination, matching each strike with precision. When she lunged for his chest, he sidestepped, catching her weapon and twisting it away. His blade came to rest just above her wrist, close enough to make her pause. Her eyes locked with his, and for a heartbeat, the entire battlefield felt still. Her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "One more exchange," she said. Daniel adjusted his stance, his blade rising. Around them, every soldier leaned forward, knowing the next clash would decide the outcome of the duel that had defied all expectations. Daniel and Serica stood facing each other, the world beyond their duel fading into the background. The heat from their weapons shimmered in the air between them, each breath they took heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. Soldiers from both sides remained frozen in place, unwilling to miss the final exchange that would decide everything. Even the distant sound of artillery seemed to pause, as if the battlefield itself was holding its breath. Serica moved first, exploding forward with a speed that made the air crack. Her blade came in high, then low, shifting angles in a way meant to keep Daniel guessing. He blocked the first strike, stepped back from the second, and twisted to deflect the third. Each movement cost him, his arms shaking from the effort. But he refused to break, his eyes locked on hers, waiting for the moment to strike back. Daniel countered with a sudden surge, his blade flashing toward her shoulder. She caught it with a swift parry, their weapons ringing in the air. The impact forced her to adjust her footing, and Daniel pressed forward, driving her toward the shattered wall behind her. She twisted away just before her back met the stone, spinning to slash at his side. The tip of her blade grazed his armor, leaving a faint scorch mark that burned against his skin. The crowd's gasps blended with the hiss of their weapons. Sirica's strikes were faster now, each one sharper than the last. Daniel blocked one, then another, and ducked under the third, feeling the wind of her swing pass over him. He rose with a quick slash toward her midsection. She deflected it, but the force pushed her a step back. That single step told him she was no longer untouchable. Her eyes glinted with challenge as she came at him again. This time, he met her blow for blow, matching her pace with precision. Sparks flew with every impact, casting brief flashes of light across their faces. Daniel felt his body moving on instinct now, each action flowing into the next. He was no longer just defending himself. He was driving the fight toward its conclusion. Sirica lunged with a powerful overhead strike. Daniel caught her blade mid-swing, their weapons locking once again. The muscles in his arms burned as he pushed against her strength. She leaned in, her voice low but steady. "You fought well, human," she said, "but it ends here." Daniel met her gaze without blinking, his grip tightening. "Yes," he replied. "It does." With a sudden shift of weight, he turned her momentum against her. The move broke her stance, forcing her off balance. Daniel stepped in, twisting his blade in a controlled arc that stopped just at her throat. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The crowd held its breath, the reality of what had happened settling over them. Sirica's chest rose and fell as she looked into his eyes, reading the resolve there. Slowly, she lowered her weapon to her side. A murmur ran through the Clearan soldiers. No one had ever seen their champion bested in such a way. Sirica straightened, her expression unreadable. "By my word," she said, her voice carrying across the silent street. "I will honor what I promised." Daniel let his blade drop, though he did not relax his stance completely. He knew respect had been earned here, but trust would take more time. She stepped closer, her golden eyes never leaving his. "You have shown me that humans are not what I believed," she said. "You are dangerous, stubborn, and impossible to predict. And that," she added, "is worth respecting." Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it that made the moment feel final. Daniel nodded once, accepting her words without ceremony. The battle around them slowly resumed, but the duel's outcome had already changed its course. Clearan forces began pulling back, their retreat not out of defeat, but out of recognition that the fight no longer served its purpose. Sirica turned to her warriors, giving them a single command. Then she faced Daniel again, a faint smile touching her lips. "From this day," she said, "you are mine." The crowd erupted, knowing the galaxy would never be the same.